I had been traveling for work all week, my mind buried in spreadsheets and client calls, yet a gnawing unease wouldn't let me rest. My wife, Emily, had been oddly busy late nights, whispered phone calls, a smile that never reached her eyes. Something didn't feel right, but I dismissed it, telling myself I was overthinking. That is, until Wednesday afternoon, when a feeling too heavy to ignore settled in my chest, I decided, on a whim, to cut my trip short. Driving home, the streets blurred past me, my heart pounding, an invisible warning thrumming in the air. And then, in the driveway, a stranger's car gleamed under the sun, idling silently, as if mocking my every step. Before we dive into the story, comment your local time and location, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping and cinematic tales. From the moment I saw that car in the driveway, a cold, creeping dread settled over me. I didn't know who it belonged to, and for a brief, panicked moment, I questioned whether I had imagined it. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I slowly approached the house, each step feeling heavier than the last. Emily had been acting strangely for weeks now. Too many late nights, whispered phone conversations that ended abruptly when I entered the room. A constant flurry of urgent errands that never seemed to have a clear purpose. At first, I had chalked it up to stress, to the natural ebb and flow of life. But the subtle shifts in her behavior, the unexplained tension in her voice, and the nervous glances she cast whenever I mentioned returning home early, they were no longer ignorable. I stepped out of the car, trying to steady my breathing. The driveway was empty, except for that unfamiliar vehicle, its metallic surface catching the fading sunlight and reflecting it in a way that made the whole scene feel unreal. My mind raced through scenarios, a friend visiting unexpectedly, a delivery, but no. There was a sense of calculated secrecy in the way the car was parked, almost deliberately angled, as if it were waiting for something. My instinct screamed that I should turn around, call for help, but the need to confront the unknown, to uncover the truth, pushed me forward. Emily had always been meticulous about the house, never a leaf out of place, every picture frame straightened, every corner spotless. Yet, today, as I approached the front door, I noticed subtle signs that something had shifted. A chair slightly moved, a vase at an odd angle, faint scratches on the wooden floor that hadn't been there before. My heart pounded. I could feel the tension building, coiling tighter and tighter in my chest with every silent step I took toward the entrance. I reached for the doorknob, hesitating for just a heartbeat, as if the act itself could trigger some irreversible revelation. Inside, the house was quieter than usual. Too quiet. Emily wasn't in the living room, where she normally spent her afternoons, catching up on reading or sipping coffee. The faint smell of her perfume lingered in the air, but it felt diluted, almost as if it were trying to mask something else. My eyes darted from room to room, noting the small inconsistencies. A window slightly ajar, shadows that didn't align with the natural light streaming through the blinds, the subtle hum of a television that wasn't turned on. Every detail heightened the sense that I was intruding into a world that had shifted in my absence, one where familiarity no longer offered comfort. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting perhaps a message from Emily, something mundane, apologetic for not telling me about an errand or a commitment. But the screen revealed nothing, no texts, no missed calls, just the glowing blackness of anticipation that seemed to mock me. I scrolled through the notifications, my fingers trembling, desperate for a clue, and then froze. A single, unread message from an unknown number blinked at me. The text read, "We need to talk. She isn't who you think she is." My chest tightened. I had no idea who had sent it or how they knew me, yet the timing was impossibly precise. Shadows shifted along the walls as I moved deeper into the house. Every creak of the floorboards beneath my feet sounded like a gunshot in the silence. I called out Emily's name, my voice cracking with tension. "Emily." The only response was the echo of my own voice bouncing off the walls, heavy and accusing. I could feel my pulse in my temples, each beat a reminder that I was alone in this house that was supposed to be my sanctuary. I moved cautiously toward the kitchen, my eyes scanning for any hint of life, any sign that would explain the stranger's presence. And then I saw it, a small envelope lying on the counter, addressed in handwriting that wasn't hers. My hands shook as I picked it up, feeling the texture of the paper, the weight of anticipation pressing down on me. Inside was a single photograph, Emily, smiling in a way I had never seen before, her arm draped around a man I didn't recognize. They were in a location that looked like a hotel lobby, the kind of place I never associated with our quiet, domestic life. Beneath the photograph was a note, simple and chilling. "It's time you knew the truth." I sank into the nearest chair, my mind racing, memories and doubts colliding in an unbearable storm. The subtle signs I had brushed aside, the late nights, the whispered calls, the unexplained absences, all came rushing back with a clarity that was almost painful. How had I not seen it? Or had I been choosing not to see, convincing myself that everything was fine? The realization was suffocating. I wanted to call her, confront her, demand answers, but my instincts told me to pause, to prepare, because whatever lay ahead was bigger than I had imagined. Minutes stretched into an eternity as I tried to piece together the fragments of the past few weeks. The texts she sent, always vague, the excuses for being busy when I tried to schedule time together, the sudden bursts of energy and secretive behavior, all of it painted a picture I wasn't ready to confront. My mind began cataloging possibilities. Was she involved in something dangerous? Someone from her past? Or was it something far more personal? Something that would shatter the very foundation of our marriage? Each scenario twisted in my thoughts, none comforting, all horrifying. I moved through the house like a ghost, noting every detail, the way the curtains swayed despite the windows being closed, the faint hum of a car outside that didn't match the stranger's vehicle in the driveway, the subtle disarray of our usually immaculate living space, all clues that pointed to an orchestrated deception. I felt the weight of betrayal pressing down on me, each heartbeat a drumbeat in the silent tension that had enveloped the home. My trust, once implicit, now felt fragile, a thin thread over a chasm of unknown truths. And then, the sound that made my blood run cold, a door upstairs creaking open. Slow and deliberate, I froze, straining to hear, every muscle taut with anticipation. Footsteps, light but confident, echoed down the hall, and I knew that I was no longer alone in this house. My mind screamed for answers, but my body betrayed me, frozen in place, caught between fear and the desperate need to confront what was coming. I took a deep breath and forced myself to move, each step deliberate, calculated. The photograph burned in my pocket, a tangible reminder that nothing would ever be the same. Every instinct screamed that I was walking into a confrontation that could change everything. And as I reached the foot of the stairs, my eyes locked on a shadow at the top, tall, broad, familiar yet alien. And I realized that the week of subtle betrayals, the late-night calls, the mysterious errands, had all led to this single, unavoidable moment. This was the point of no return. The truth, whatever it was, awaited me, and I had no choice but to face it. Every breath I took felt heavier, each heartbeat echoing like a drum of impending revelation. Emily, the woman I had trusted, the life I thought I knew, the sanctuary I had built, all hung in the balance of what I was about to discover. The moment I stepped into the house, an uncanny stillness greeted me. It was the kind of silence that presses against your chest, a suffocating hush that seems almost deliberate, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to unfold. The sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds, casting elongated, distorted shadows across the polished wooden floor. Every familiar corner of the house seemed slightly off, subtly altered, as if reality had shifted in my absence. I moved cautiously, each step producing the softest creak, yet in that silence, every sound echoed with the weight of an unspoken warning. Emily's absence was immediate and undeniable. She wasn't in the living room, where she normally curled up with a book, or sipped her late afternoon tea, the faint scent of her perfume lingered in the air, but it was diluted, almost artificial, as if it were meant to reassure me, but failed. I walked slowly toward the kitchen, my eyes scanning for signs of life. There, the small details began to betray the reality I had been avoiding for weeks. A chair slightly askew, a coffee cup still warm but half empty, the crumbs on the counter that had somehow been left undisturbed. It was as though someone had been here, but didn't expect me to arrive so soon. I tried to calm myself, repeating to my mind that there could be a reasonable explanation. Perhaps a friend, a neighbor, someone I didn't know well. But the stranger's car in the driveway and the intensity of Emily's recent secrecy made such rationalizations impossible. My chest tightened with a mixture of fear and disbelief, and the rational part of my mind warred against my instincts. I knew, deep down, that something was profoundly wrong. The nagging feeling that had been growing for weeks now roared with certainty. I was about to uncover a truth I might not be ready to face. As I moved toward the stairs, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, half hoping for a reassuring message from Emily, half fearing the unknown. The screen illuminated a notification from an unknown number. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen, my mind spiraling. Slowly, I opened the message. "You're closer than you think. Don't trust appearances." The words were stark, cryptic, and they sent a shiver down my spine. I had no idea who sent it or how they could know I had arrived early. Panic and curiosity collided violently, leaving me almost paralyzed. I decided to check the upstairs, a place that had always been my sanctuary in the house. Our bedroom, the study, the small library Emily loved all places, filled with memories that now felt alien. The staircase creaked under my weight, each sound amplified in the tense quiet. I gripped the railing tightly, trying to steady my breathing, to control the pounding of my heart. I reached the top, and the hallway stretched before me, empty and silent, yet charged with a sense of expectation, as though the house itself knew I was coming. Each door I passed offered a glimpse of the familiar turned strange. The study, normally neat and meticulously organized, had papers scattered across the desk, some with notes I didn't recognize. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, I saw the sheets rumpled in a way that suggested recent activity. My stomach churned with unease. The home I had known as a place of comfort now felt like a stage set for a confrontation I wasn't prepared for. I paused outside the bedroom, listening. At first, there was nothing, just the distant hum of a refrigerator downstairs and the faint creak of the house settling. But then, subtle enough that I might have missed it if I hadn't been paying attention, there was a whisper, a movement too deliberate to be accidental. I froze, straining to hear. The whispering stopped as suddenly as it began, replaced by a silence so profound it pressed against my eardrums. I felt my pulse hammer in my temples. Every instinct told me that I was about to witness something that would shatter my perception of Emily, of our life together. I forced myself to move, to confront whatever truth awaited me. The photograph I had discovered earlier burned in my pocket, a tangible reminder of the lies that had accumulated over weeks, Emily's subtle deceptions, the secretive phone calls, the unexplained absences. They all converged in this single moment. And I realized that I had been naive, that I had wanted to believe in a reality that no longer existed. As I stepped into the bedroom, my eyes immediately fell on the dresser. A black object, a recording device, sat inconspicuously among the personal items. My stomach dropped. This was no casual mistake, no simple misunderstanding. Someone had been monitoring, recording, observing. The reality of it hit me like a physical blow. I realized, with chilling clarity, that Emily's unusual busyness was not just a quirk or a phase. It was part of a carefully orchestrated deception. My mind raced to piece together the fragments of the past few weeks. The subtle inconsistencies, the half-truths, the evasive responses, all suddenly formed a coherent pattern. She had been hiding something monumental, and I had been blind, complicit in my own ignorance. The dread I felt wasn't just for myself, it was for the life we had built, the trust that had been the foundation of our marriage. Every cherished memory now seemed tinged with doubt, every laugh shared under a false pretense. I moved through the room, eyes scanning every surface, every detail, a set of keys on the nightstand, a crumpled receipt, a pair of gloves that weren't hers. Each item was a silent accusation, a clue to the reality I hadn't wanted to confront. My body felt heavy, my limbs tense, as though the air itself was laden with the weight of betrayal. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the house held me in a tense grip, insisting that I proceed carefully, that I uncover the truth with measured steps. And then, a sound from downstairs, soft but deliberate, drew my attention. Footsteps. They weren't random. They had a rhythm, a purpose. Someone was moving through the house, watching, waiting, orchestrating. I felt a surge of fear and anger, a potent mix that made my hands clench into fists. Every instinct screamed at me to confront, to demand answers, to rip the veil of deception apart. But another part of me, the part that had learned to observe, to calculate, held back. Urging caution, I crept toward the top of the stairs, peering down. The stranger's car in the driveway was still there, silent and imposing, and a shadow moved through the living room. My breath caught in my throat. The figure paused, as if sensing my presence, then resumed moving, confident and deliberate. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that the person inside wasn't just anyone they had been expecting me, anticipating my arrival. This wasn't a random intrusion. It was a carefully planned encounter, a convergence of secrets and timing that had brought me to this point. As I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, the weight of weeks of doubt, suspicion, and anxiety pressed down on me, I thought of the conversations we had had, the subtle signs I had brushed aside, the rationalizations I had clung to in order to maintain my sense of security. All of it had been a fragile illusion, and now the full extent of the deception was poised to reveal itself. My heart pounded, my mind raced, and I realized that nothing would ever be the same once I took the next step. Once I confronted the reality that Emily had been hiding from me. The house, once a place of comfort, now felt like a labyrinth of tension and betrayal. Every room, every object, every shadow was imbued with meaning, a silent testament to secrets and lies. I felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on me, demanding answers, demanding confrontation, and in that moment, I understood that the journey ahead wouldn't just be about uncovering the truth, it would be about facing it, no matter how painful, no matter how shattering. Driving away from the office that morning had felt routine at first, the usual hum of traffic, the familiar rhythm of stoplights and distant car horns. But the moment I decided to cut my trip short, every mile back home was charged with an electric tension I couldn't shake. The highway stretched ahead like a taut wire, and my thoughts spun in endless loops. Emily's phone calls that I'd overheard, the unexplained errands, the odd behavior, all of it replayed in my mind like fragments of a puzzle I hadn't been brave enough to solve. My gut told me something was wrong, something dangerous, yet I couldn't pinpoint what or how far it went. As the miles ticked by, I felt a growing sense of urgency, a tightness in my chest that wouldn't relent. I had envisioned returning to our home under normal circumstances, perhaps surprising her, sharing a laugh, or slipping back into the rhythm of everyday life. But now, each passing car, each shadow along the roadside, seemed like an omen. My fingers drummed nervously against the steering wheel as I wondered who the stranger in our driveway could be and what role they played in the increasingly incomprehensible changes in Emily's behavior. Memories of the previous week flitted through my mind, how she had been constantly busy, brushing off my calls with a vague, "I have too much to do," how her smiles never quite reached her eyes, the moments when she seemed distracted, almost rehearsed. At the time, I had told myself it was stress, a temporary deviation from our normal life, but now I recognized the signs I had chosen to ignore. They had all led me here, to this charged moment where every possibility felt simultaneously plausible and terrifying. The streets near our neighborhood looked different in the afternoon sun. Familiar yet unsettling, trees cast long shadows over the sidewalks, and the houses we had walked past countless times suddenly seemed foreign. My mind was hyper-aware of every detail, every flicker of movement. I felt as though I were walking through a world that had been subtly rearranged in my absence, one where the familiar was just a facade masking deeper truths. The stranger's car, which I had glimpsed in my imagination more times than I could count, seemed to wait for me like a sentinel. I found myself gripping the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles pale, approaching the driveway, my eyes immediately locked on the vehicle. It was parked with precise intent, a sleek black sedan that gleamed under the afternoon sun, reflecting the environment around it in distorted waves. My stomach churned. The car wasn't just out of place. It was deliberate, almost provocative. My mind scrambled for explanations. Could it be a neighbor, a delivery? But the air around it suggested more than mere coincidence. It was the silent, tense aura of a premeditated encounter. I exited the car cautiously, my shoes crunching softly against the gravel. The driveway seemed impossibly long, each step magnifying the tension, as though I were walking toward a precipice without knowing what awaited below. My heart pounded in my chest, a relentless drumbeat echoing in my ears. The scent of freshly mown grass mingled with the faint smell of gasoline from the sedan, creating an atmosphere that was both ordinary and unnervingly charged. My mind whirled, spinning through worst-case scenarios and desperate rationalizations, each one more harrowing than the last. I tried to steady my breathing as I moved closer to the house, the familiar exterior now appearing foreign, almost sinister. Windows that normally reflected light warmly now seemed dark, opaque, and unwelcoming. The front door, which had welcomed me countless times with open warmth, now felt like a barrier to the unknown. Every instinct screamed caution, yet I felt compelled to proceed, driven by the gnawing need to uncover the truth. Inside, the house was unnervingly still. No hum of the refrigerator, no distant whir of the dishwasher, no familiar creak of floorboards in the hallway. Just silence. I called out softly, "Emily." My voice seemed to vanish into the house, swallowed by the walls that had always felt like guardians. The absence of her response only heightened my unease. Something had shifted, subtly but irrevocably, and I felt the weight of it pressing down on me. The living room appeared unchanged at first glance, but the details betrayed a hidden narrative. A cushion was slightly displaced on the couch. A mug on the coffee table was half empty, cold to the touch, and a throw blanket lay crumpled on the floor, as though someone had left in a hurry. Each small anomaly was a whisper, hinting at hidden activity, at secrets concealed behind the familiar domesticity I had taken for granted. My mind raced, trying to piece together what had happened in the hours and days that I had been away. A faint movement at the far end of the hallway caught my eye. Shadows shifted, subtle but deliberate, as if someone had been aware of my arrival and chose the precise moment to move. My body tensed, every nerve alight with anticipation and fear. I wanted to retreat, to escape the escalating tension, but the need to confront the unknown, to understand the full scope of what had been hidden from me, propelled me forward. I moved cautiously, each step calculated, my ears straining to catch any sound, my eyes scanning for any telltale signs of presence. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, jolting me from my thoughts. I pulled it out, hoping for a message from Emily, some mundane explanation that would ease the suffocating anxiety. But the screen displayed nothing but the time and a single, cryptic notification from an unknown number. It read, "She isn't alone. You need to know." My stomach twisted. The timing was uncanny. The message perfectly aligned with my return. The words were simple, yet they carried an ominous weight, confirming the unease that had been building for weeks. I took a deep breath, trying to ground myself. I moved toward the stairs, each step measured, conscious of the creak of the wood beneath my feet. The house, once a sanctuary, I now felt like a stage for confrontation. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret, every whisper of movement a potential threat. My mind raced through past encounters, scrutinizing Emily's behavior, each action now reframed under the lens of suspicion and fear. The late-night calls, the whispered explanations, the evasions. They were no longer minor quirks, but pieces of a puzzle forming a pattern I could no longer ignore. As I reached the top of the stairs, a subtle noise echoed from the hallway. A soft shuffle, deliberate and controlled. I froze, straining to hear, every sense heightened. The moment stretched, time itself seeming to bend under the weight of anticipation. I realized, with an icy clarity, that I was no longer walking into a home of comfort and familiarity. I was stepping into a carefully constructed maze of secrets, one that demanded my full attention, my courage, and perhaps a willingness to confront truths I had long avoided. The moment I paused at the top of the stairs, I realized that every step I had taken from the driveway to this point had been a rehearsal for the confrontation I had been subconsciously preparing for. My chest tightened with the weight of anticipation, and my pulse raced so violently that I was certain Emily, wherever she was, would hear it. I could feel my mind teetering on the edge of panic, yet a sliver of resolve urged me forward. I had to know the truth. I had to confront the reality that had been quietly building over the past weeks, a truth that, if ignored, could unravel everything I had trusted. As I slowly descended the staircase, my eyes scanned every corner of the hallway, every door, every shadow. The house, which had always felt like an extension of my own psyche, now seemed alien, charged with an energy that I could neither name nor control. There was a tension in the air, an almost tangible pressure that suggested I was not merely entering a home, but stepping into a theater of secrets. Each footstep became a test of courage, each creak of the floorboards a reminder of the unknown forces at play within these walls. I reached the bottom of the stairs and paused again, listening intently. The faintest rustle from the living room made me freeze. My instincts screamed at me to turn and run, to call for help, but the part of me that demanded clarity, the part that refused to live with uncertainty, pushed me forward. I approached the living room cautiously, each movement deliberate, my senses attuned to every whisper of sound, every flicker of movement. Then I saw it, a stack of papers on the coffee table that had not been there before. The top sheet was a printed document, neatly aligned, but the contents were immediately alarming. It appeared to be a series of email exchanges, correspondence between Emily and an unknown individual. The messages were innocuous on the surface, polite and seemingly mundane, but a deeper read revealed a tone of secrecy, urgency, and manipulation. My heart raced as I scanned the emails, piecing together a narrative that was simultaneously shocking and disorienting. Emily's recent behavior, which I had tried to rationalize, suddenly fell into place. The late-night phone calls, the evasive answers, the sudden urgent errands, all of it now had a context that was impossible to ignore. She had been navigating a double life, one that I had been blind to, despite the glaring signs. My stomach churned with a mixture of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. How had I not seen this coming? Had I truly been so oblivious? Or had I chosen to ignore the signs in favor of comforting illusions? I moved toward the kitchen, hoping to find something tangible, a clue that would explain the stranger's car in the driveway. My movements were careful, almost ritualistic, as though I were attempting to minimize my presence and avoid alerting anyone who might be inside. The faint aroma of coffee lingered in the air, mixed with an undertone of something I couldn't quite identify. Perhaps the lingering scent of fear or tension. Each detail sharpened the sense of intrusion, of trespassing into a world that had been meticulously concealed from me. On the counter, I noticed a set of keys that did not belong to Emily. I picked them up, examining the unfamiliar make and model, and my mind raced with possibilities. The stranger in the driveway could not be random. Every piece of evidence pointed to a deliberate plan. a careful orchestration of events designed to manipulate, to deceive. The magnitude of it was overwhelming, yet I knew I had to proceed, to confront whatever lay ahead with clarity and resolve. I retraced my steps back toward the living room, eyes scanning for further evidence. A photograph on the mantelpiece caught my attention, not just any photo, but one that had been subtly altered. Emily stood beside a man I did not recognize, smiling in a way that suggested familiarity, intimacy, yet there was an edge of tension in their posture. My stomach twisted as I realized that this was not merely a casual acquaintance. The relationship hinted at something deeper, something deliberately concealed from me. The room was suddenly alive with tension. Every shadow seemed to harbor secrets. Every reflection in the window, a distorted mirror of the reality I had once taken for granted. My breathing grew shallow, each inhale heavy with anticipation, each exhale a reluctant acknowledgement of the unfolding truth. I felt the weight of weeks of deception pressing down on me, demanding confrontation, demanding clarity. Then, as if orchestrated by some cruel design, my phone buzzed again, another message from the same unknown number. Check the bedroom. You need to see this before it's too late. My hands shook as I read the words. The urgency, the precision, the timing, all of it suggested a calculated intent to expose the truth in a way that I could not have anticipated. I realized that I was not merely uncovering a secret. I was entering a labyrinth of deception, one that had been constructed with meticulous care. Summoning what courage I could, I moved toward the bedroom. Each step was deliberate, measured, as though I were navigating a minefield. The hallway stretched before me, shadows stretching like fingers, reaching out to clutch at my resolve. I could feel my pulse in my ears, a relentless drumbeat that mirrored the anxiety tightening around my chest. The photograph, the emails, the keys, they all converged into a single, undeniable truth. Emily had been living a life I was not privy to, and the stranger's presence was not coincidental. As I reached the bedroom door, I paused. The faint sound of movement within the soft shuffle of footsteps, the subtle creak of the floorboards confirmed my worst fears. Someone else was inside. My mind raced, trying to anticipate the scenario. A confrontation, a revelation, perhaps even a threat. The stakes were higher than I had imagined, and yet the need for truth propelled me forward. I pushed the door open slowly, my eyes immediately scanning the room. At first, it appeared empty, deceptively so. But then I noticed subtle signs. A jacket draped over the back of a chair, a pair of shoes that weren't Emily's, a faint outline of footprints on the rug. The room had been occupied, and the occupant had left in haste or in deliberate avoidance of my arrival. The tension was almost tangible, as though the very air had been charged with anticipation. Waiting for the confrontation that would inevitably come, I sank onto the edge of the bed, my mind spinning as I tried to process the cascade of revelations, the signs, the emails, the photograph, the keys, the stranger's car. They all painted a picture of calculated deception, one that I had been blind to. Despite the subtle clues strewn across our lives, I felt a mix of disbelief, sorrow, and anger, emotions intertwining in a way that made it almost impossible to breathe. And yet, despite the emotional chaos, I knew I had to act, to confront, to demand answers, to face the truth that had been meticulously hidden from me. Every instinct urged caution, every impulse demanded confrontation. I was caught between fear and determination, between the desire to flee and the need to understand. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage set for an intricate drama of betrayal and revelation. And in that charged silence, I realized that the weeks of subtle signs, the whispered calls, the unexplained errands, had all been leading to this precise moment. The truth awaited me, and I had no choice but to uncover it. The decision to cut my trip short had seemed impulsive at first, a fleeting thought fueled by unease and the subtle dissonance I had felt in Emily's behavior over the past weeks. Yet now, as I sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of that choice pressed down on me with the gravity of inevitability. The house was silent, but the silence was not comforting. It was thick, suffocating, pregnant with the unknown. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of sunlight through the blinds, felt magnified, signaling that the moment of reckoning I had been dreading had arrived. I tried to gather my thoughts, to impose order on the chaotic swirl of suspicion, fear, and anger that coursed through me. The photograph I had discovered earlier lay on the dresser, its presence a constant reminder that nothing about the past weeks had been as it seemed. I studied it again, noting the subtle body language, the smiles, the way Emily's hand rested on the stranger's arm. Something about the image suggested intimacy, yet it also hinted at concealment, a performance carefully designed to mislead. My stomach churned at the thought that the woman I had trusted completely might have been living a secret life right under my nose. I stood and moved toward the window, peering through the blinds at the stranger's car still parked in the driveway. The vehicle's presence was deliberate, a silent assertion of control and unpredictability. I felt an urgent need to act, to confront whatever truth awaited me, but the uncertainty gnawed at me. Who was the stranger? How long had this been going on? And most pressingly, how deeply had Emily been involved in whatever secret had been orchestrated in our home? The questions multiplied with each passing moment, yet the answers remained just out of reach, teasing and taunting me. I took a deep breath and made my way downstairs, each step measured and deliberate. The living room, once a place of comfort and familiarity, now felt alien, charged with a tension that made my skin prickle. The couch cushions were still slightly displaced, the coffee table littered with documents and photographs, subtle clues that someone had been there recently and had left in haste or in calculated avoidance of my sudden return. I felt a surge of anger at the thought of intrusion, of secrecy, yet, beneath it, there was a more profound fear, fear of the truth itself, the reality that might shatter the life I had carefully built. My eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail, every subtle anomaly. A set of keys lay on the side table, not Emily's, unfamiliar in design and weight. I picked them up, turning them over in my hands, trying to imagine who could have placed them there and why. My pulse quickened as I considered the possibilities, the stranger's presence in the driveway, the subtle hints of clandestine activity within the house, and the encrypted tone of the messages I had received. All pointed to a meticulously planned secret, one I had only just begun to uncover. The idea that Emily had been intentionally deceiving me gnawed at my resolve. I recalled the late-night phone calls, the whispered explanations, the hurried errands. What had I been thinking when I brushed them aside as minor quirks? The realization hit with brutal clarity. I had been blind to the signs, complicit in my own ignorance. Now, the consequences of that blindness were materializing in front of me, in the form of a stranger in my driveway, a house filled with subtle anomalies, and a woman I no longer fully recognized. I forced myself to focus, to prioritize observation over reaction. Panic would not serve me here. Clarity would. I moved through the house systematically, inspecting each room for further signs of intrusion or evidence. The kitchen revealed more subtle disturbances, a knife slightly out of place, a cupboard door ajar, crumbs on the counter that had not been there before. Each detail, minor in isolation, coalesced into a pattern of deliberate activity, suggesting that the stranger's presence was no accident, and that Emily had either been complicit or unaware of the full scope of what was happening. As I approached the staircase again, a sudden movement caught my eye, a shadow flitting across the hallway floor, deliberate and controlled. My breath caught in my throat. Someone was inside the house. The very air seemed to vibrate with tension, charged with anticipation, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. My heart pounded violently in my chest, but I forced myself to remain calm, to observe, to assess, to prepare for the confrontation that I knew was inevitable. The bedroom door loomed ahead, partially open, a sliver of shadow visible within. I could hear subtle noises, soft shuffling, a creak, the faint rustle of fabric. Whoever was in there had been expecting me, or at least aware of my presence. My mind raced, balancing fear with determination. I had to know the truth, even if it shattered everything I thought I knew. Every instinct screamed at me to proceed carefully, to be deliberate in my actions, to anticipate whatever lay beyond that threshold. With slow, deliberate movements, I entered the bedroom. The room was empty, deceptively calm, yet every detail betrayed recent occupancy. A jacket draped over a chair, shoes not belonging to Emily, a faint indentation on the bed. The house, once a sanctuary of trust and intimacy, now felt like a stage set for deception. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine, an awareness that the weeks of subtle betrayals, the whispered phone calls, and the unexplained errands had all been part of a larger, orchestrated pattern. I sank onto the bed, overwhelmed by a torrent of emotions, anger, disbelief, sorrow, and a gnawing sense of vulnerability. The photograph, the emails, the keys, and the stranger's car formed a constellation of evidence that painted a picture of calculated secrecy. I realized, with crushing clarity, that my understanding of Emily, of our life together, had been incomplete. I had been navigating a landscape of hidden truths, blind to the reality that was unfolding right before me. Every instinct urged me to act, to confront, to demand answers. Yet caution dictated patience. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was walking into. The house seemed to pulse with a silent energy, as though aware that the moment of revelation was imminent. My mind raced through the possibilities, trying to anticipate the stranger's identity, Emily's role in the unfolding drama, and the consequences of each potential discovery. Finally, I stood, steeling myself for the inevitable confrontation. The days of subtle hints, of whispered calls and evasive behavior had led to this moment. I understood now that the truth would not be revealed through speculation or fear. It demanded courage, observation, and the willingness to face the reality, no matter how painful. The weight of anticipation pressed on me, yet beneath it, a fragile thread of determination held me steady. I knew that the path ahead would be difficult, that the revelations could shatter the life I had known, but the need for clarity, for truth, it was inescapable. Every step I took from that moment onward felt monumental, each movement carrying the potential to expose layers of deception I had only begun to understand. The house, once a haven, had become a crucible for confrontation, a space where the hidden truths of the past weeks would finally be revealed. And as I prepared to navigate this final threshold, I realized that my journey had transformed from one of suspicion and unease to a decisive confrontation with reality, a reckoning that demanded courage, clarity, and the willingness to confront truths long concealed. The moment I stepped onto the driveway, the air felt different, almost electric, as though the world had shifted subtly while I was away. The stranger's car gleamed under the pale afternoon sun, a sleek, black sedan that seemed almost alive in its stillness. Waiting, watching, my pulse quickened as I approached, each step feeling heavier than the last, a drumbeat of anticipation echoing through my chest. The neighborhood around me, usually so familiar and comforting, appeared distorted, foreign. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the lawn, and the gentle sway of the trees seemed to carry a sinister rhythm. Every instinct screamed that I was about to cross a threshold, one from which there was no turning back. I paused at the edge of the driveway, straining my eyes to discern any hint of movement inside the car. The windows were tinted, obscuring the interior, yet I could sense a presence, a consciousness behind the glass. My mind raced through possibilities. Could it be a friend of Emily's, visiting unexpectedly, a delivery, an Uber mistakenly dropped off at the wrong house? Each rational explanation felt increasingly implausible. The precision of the parking, the timing of my arrival, the series of cryptic messages I had received, they all pointed to something deliberate, something orchestrated. My chest tightened, a knot of tension that refused to loosen. I approached the front door slowly, trying to calm my racing thoughts, but the familiar path felt surreal. Gravel crunched under my shoes, each sound amplified, echoing into the quiet street. I reached the threshold of my home, and a wave of dread washed over me. This was not the safe, welcoming place I had left. It was a stage for a revelation, a crucible of confrontation, where the hidden truths of the past weeks would finally be revealed. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to push past the fear, to step inside and face whatever awaited me. The moment I crossed the threshold, the atmosphere inside the house shifted palpably. The silence was thick, suffocating, pressing against me like a living entity. The faint scent of Emily's perfume lingered, but it was diluted, almost artificial, and it did little to reassure me. My eyes darted around, scanning every corner for signs of movement or disturbance. The living room, though seemingly unchanged, held subtle anomalies. A cushion slightly displaced, a throw blanket draped oddly over the arm of the sofa, a faint smudge on the polished wood floor. Each detail heightened my sense of unease, hinting at a narrative I had not yet fully grasped. I called out softly, my voice trembling despite my efforts to appear composed, "Emily." The word echoed through the house, swallowed by the walls, unanswered. My stomach churned, and a wave of apprehension washed over me. The silence that responded was not comforting. It was loaded with implication, as though the house itself was complicit in concealing the truth. Every shadow, every flicker of movement in the periphery of my vision seemed charged with intent, warning me of the confrontation that awaited. I moved toward the kitchen, my movements deliberate, each step a cautious negotiation with the tension that seemed to cling to every surface. The countertop held a few subtle clues. A mug, still warm, its contents half consumed. A set of keys not belonging to Emily, their metallic weight in my hand, a silent accusation, and a series of documents neatly stacked yet seemingly out of place, hinting at recent activity. The sum of these details painted a picture that was both alarming and disorienting. A pattern of deliberate intrusion, or perhaps complicity, that I had been too blind or too trusting to notice. I forced myself to take a deep breath, to ground myself amidst the whirlwind of suspicion and anxiety. My eyes scanned the room again, and that's when I noticed a small, subtle movement near the corner of the kitchen. At first, it could have been dismissed as a trick of the light, but instinctively, I knew better. Someone was there. My pulse quickened, adrenaline surging through my veins as fear and determination collided within me. I was aware of every sound, every shadow, every nuance of the space around me. The familiar had become unfamiliar. Ordinary objects transformed into potential clues, each carrying significance I had only just begun to comprehend. I edged closer to the living room, taking care to move quietly, to avoid any sudden noise that might alert the unseen occupant. The tension was palpable, almost suffocating. Each breath I drew heavy with anticipation. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, yet there was a singular focus driving me forward, the need to uncover the truth, no matter how painful or shocking it might be. The weeks of subtle hints, the whispered phone calls, the unexplained errands, all had led me here. To this moment of reckoning, as I approached the living room, I caught sight of a shadow shifting near the doorway. My breath caught in my throat, a mixture of fear and disbelief washing over me. Whoever or whatever was inside had been aware of my arrival. The deliberate movement, the timing, the precision, it all suggested an orchestrated presence, a calculated awareness that heightened the suspense of the moment. I felt a surge of anger, tempered by a deeper, more profound fear, the realization that Emily, the person I had trusted implicitly, might have been complicit in this orchestration. I forced myself to move slowly, deliberately, each step a negotiation with the fear coiling tight in my chest. The living room stretched before me. Every object, every shadow, every flicker of light now charged with meaning. I noticed subtle details I had never paid attention to before. a faint scratch on the wooden floor, a chair slightly out of place, the glint of a reflective surface catching sunlight at just the right angle to obscure its true nature. These seemingly minor anomalies coalesced into a pattern of deliberate intent, a silent message that demanded interpretation. The stranger's car outside was more than a presence. It was a statement. It asserted control, unpredictability, and the orchestration of events that had led me to this charged moment. I knew that what awaited me inside could alter everything I had believed about my marriage, my trust, and my life. And yet, despite the fear, despite the overwhelming uncertainty, I felt compelled to proceed. The need for clarity, for confrontation, for truth was stronger than any instinct to flee. I took a deep breath and stepped fully into the living room. The silence was oppressive, almost tangible, pressing in from all sides. Every creak, every whisper of movement in the house seemed amplified, charged with anticipation. I could sense the presence of the unknown, lurking just beyond my vision, waiting. My mind raced, trying to anticipate the next move, trying to prepare for the revelation that was imminent. I understood that the moment I had been dreading and yet seeking had finally arrived. The house, once a sanctuary of comfort and familiarity, now felt like a labyrinth of tension and secrecy. Every shadow, every object, every subtle detail seemed to pulse with anticipation, holding its breath until the confrontation could unfold. I realized, with a mix of dread and determination, that the truth was no longer hidden. It was here, palpable and unavoidable, and I had to confront it, no matter the cost. My pulse quickened, my breath shortened, but I knew I had to continue forward, to meet whatever awaited me in this house. Now charged with secrets and suspense, the shadow shifted again, and my heart nearly stopped. I pressed myself against the wall, careful to stay out of sight, my eyes narrowing to catch the slightest movement. Whoever or whatever was inside had been expecting me, or at least aware of my presence. The air was thick with tension, heavy and electric, each second stretching impossibly long. I strained to hear any sound, every creak of the floorboards amplified in the charged silence. The house, once a sanctuary of comfort and warmth, had transformed into a theater of suspense, where every detail, every shadow, every whisper held potential significance. A figure emerged from the kitchen, moving with a deliberate calm that sent a chill down my spine. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothing that blended seamlessly with the shadows, making him appear almost spectral in the dim light. His face was obscured by the angle and the low lighting, but the confidence in his posture, the controlled cadence of his movements, suggested someone accustomed to authority, someone who knew exactly how to command attention without uttering a word. My pulse spiked, adrenaline coursing through my veins, and I realized that this was not a random intruder. This was calculated, deliberate, and aware of my arrival. I stepped back, my mind racing. Was this the person Emily had been meeting, or someone else entirely? The photograph I had found, the messages, the subtle inconsistencies over the past weeks, all pointed toward a life that had been carefully concealed from me. Each clue now seemed to converge in this moment, a high-stakes intersection of revelation and confrontation. I knew that if I made a wrong move, the consequences could be catastrophic, yet my need for answers, for clarity, for truth, compelled me forward. I moved slowly, deliberately, keeping to the edges of the room, every step measured. The stranger paused, almost as if sensing my presence, his head tilting slightly, a shadow of recognition flickering across his stance. My chest tightened with the realization that I had entered a carefully controlled scenario, one that had been orchestrated with precision. This was no mere coincidence. Every detail, every nuance, every subtle anomaly in Emily's behavior now revealed itself as part of an elaborate plan. The living room was suddenly alive with tension. The air vibrated with unspoken communication, a silent dialogue between the stranger, the house, and myself. Each detail I had noticed in the past hours, the shifted cushions, the misplaced keys, the half-empty mug, took on new significance. They were markers, signs of a life meticulously managed, a reality carefully constructed to conceal the truth. The weight of betrayal pressed down on me, each heartbeat a drumbeat of anxiety and anticipation. I found myself recalling the past few weeks in agonizing detail. The late-night calls, the whispered conversations that ended abruptly when I entered the room, Emily's unexplained errands, the subtle avoidance of my questions. Every moment I had rationalized away now revealed itself as a breadcrumb on a path leading directly to this confrontation. My mind raced, attempting to connect the dots, to understand the narrative that had been carefully concealed from me. The stranger moved again, this time closer to the center of the room. His steps were silent, controlled, almost predatory in their precision. My instincts screamed at me to act, to confront, but caution tempered my impulses. I had to understand the full scope of what I was facing before making any move. The photograph in my pocket, the mysterious emails, the cryptic messages, they were all pieces of a puzzle whose final image was just out of reach. I inched closer to the edge of the room, keeping the shadowed walls between us. My eyes scanned every inch of the figure, noting subtle cues, the tilt of his shoulders, the rhythm of his breathing, the way his hands flexed and relaxed. He exuded control, a deliberate calm that made my own pulse race faster. He was not reckless. He was strategic, precise, aware. Every fiber of my being screamed that this was someone dangerous, someone who had been carefully integrated into our lives, someone whose presence in my home was no accident. And then I saw it, a fleeting glance of recognition in his posture, a subtle acknowledgement that he knew more than I could fathom. My mind reeled. Was he working with Emily? Was he the mysterious figure from the photograph? The realization that the truth might be more complex than I had imagined sent a shiver down my spine. I felt simultaneously exposed and compelled to act. Every second that passed was a reminder that this encounter was inevitable, a culmination of weeks of subtle deceit, of hidden truths, of orchestrated tension. I adjusted my stance, readying myself for confrontation, yet careful to avoid alarming him prematurely. The air between us was taut, electric, charged with anticipation. Every sound, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant creak of floorboards, the subtle flutter of the curtains in the breeze became amplified. A chorus of suspense that heightened my senses and sharpened my focus. I could feel the history of our home, the intimacy and trust it had once represented, now transformed into a stage for revelation and reckoning. The figure finally stepped into a beam of sunlight filtering through the window, revealing more of his form. He was undeniably human, yet there was something almost inhuman in the controlled, deliberate way he carried himself. My stomach twisted with a mixture of fear and determination. This was no random visitor. This was someone who had been strategically placed, someone who understood the stakes, someone whose presence demanded attention, observation, and careful planning on my part. I took a slow, measured breath, trying to center myself amidst the whirlwind of emotions. I reminded myself that clarity, observation, and patience were my allies. This was not a moment to act rashly, but to carefully assess, to prepare for whatever revelation awaited. Each subtle movement, each glance, each shift in posture provided a clue, a piece of the intricate puzzle that had been orchestrated around me. I knew that my next actions would determine the trajectory of this confrontation, shaping the unfolding narrative of betrayal, revelation, and the pursuit of truth. And then, the stranger froze, his head tilting slightly, eyes narrowing, as if he had sensed the intensity of my observation. The room seemed to hold its breath, time itself stretching to accommodate the charged anticipation. I realized with chilling clarity that the weeks of secrecy, the whispers, the evasions, and the subtle signs had all been leading to this precise moment. The house, once a sanctuary, was now a crucible, a testing ground for courage, perception, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Every instinct told me to proceed, to confront, to demand answers. The tension was unbearable. A coil of energy wound tight, threatening to snap. My chest tightened, my pulse thundered in my ears, and I felt a surge of determination. I would uncover the truth, no matter the consequences. The figure before me, deliberate and controlled, represented the culmination of weeks of deception, a living testament to the hidden realities that had been lurking just beyond my perception. I took a careful step forward, each movement deliberate, as though the air itself had thickened into a viscous resistance. My eyes never left the stranger, who stood in the center of the living room with the calm, predatory grace of someone entirely unafraid of my presence. His posture was taut, controlled, every movement precise. The weight of weeks of suspicion, doubt, and unanswered questions pressed down on me, and I knew that I had to confront not just him, but Emily, the woman I had trusted with my life, now at the center of this inexplicable storm. "Emily," I called, my voice unsteady, catching somewhere between fear, anger, and disbelief. The name echoed off the walls, swallowed by the house, yet it carried an invisible demand for acknowledgement, a plea for truth. The stranger shifted slightly, his attention momentarily flicking in my direction, but he did not speak. That silence was more chilling than any confrontation, amplifying the tension, making the seconds stretch interminably. My pulse thundered in my chest as I tried to collect my thoughts, to piece together the narrative that had been carefully concealed from me. And then I saw her, Emily, emerging from the kitchen doorway, her expression carefully composed, yet her eyes betrayed a flicker of surprise, a momentary crack in the facade she had maintained for weeks. She had been aware, or at least partially aware, that I might return early, and yet she had not prepared me for this. Her posture was deliberate, controlled, almost rehearsed, and I felt an immediate rush of conflicting emotions: relief that she was unharmed, fury at the secrecy, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. I took a step closer, struggling to keep my voice steady. "What is going on here?" I demanded, every syllable charged with frustration, disbelief, and heartbreak. My eyes darted between her and the stranger, trying to gauge the dynamics, to understand the nature of their connection. Her lips parted slightly, but no immediate explanation came. The tension in the room thickened, pressing against me like a physical force. Every instinct screamed at me that the next words would determine the course of this confrontation, shaping the reality I would have to accept or reject. Emily's eyes met mine, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of vulnerability, a hint of the woman I had known beneath the carefully constructed facade, but it was quickly masked by a practiced composure, a veneer of control that reminded me that the truth here would not come easily. I can explain," she said, her voice measured, careful, yet it carried the weight of unspoken secrets. My mind raced, trying to anticipate the explanation, trying to prepare for whatever revelation was about to unfold. The stranger took a step back, his presence still imposing. Yet he remained silent. There was an understanding between him and Emily, subtle but unmistakable, a silent dialogue conveyed through posture, gesture, and a glance. It was this unspoken connection that made my stomach churn, the realization that I had been navigating a labyrinth of secrecy whose intricacies I was only beginning to comprehend. I felt my anger and confusion intensify, each emotion coiling tighter, demanding release, demanding answers. "I've been noticing things, Emily," I continued, my voice rising with urgency. "Late nights, phone calls you didn't want me to hear, errands that didn't make sense. All of it. I saw the emails, the photograph. I know something has been going on, and I need to hear it from you. Now." My words hung in the air, charged with accusation and a desperate need for clarity. The house itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her response. For the unraveling of the carefully hidden narrative, Emily's gaze flicked to the stranger, a subtle acknowledgement passing between them before she turned back to me. I didn't want you to find out this way," she said, her voice trembling slightly despite her attempt at composure. "It's not what it looks like." Her words did little to assuage the storm inside me. I felt a mix of relief, confusion, and fury. The stranger, meanwhile, remained still, a silent witness to this confrontation, his presence amplifying the intensity of the moment. I moved closer, my chest tight with suppressed emotion. Not what it looks like, I echoed, disbelief dripping from every word. Emily, this looks like deception, weeks of it, secrets, lies. I trusted you everything we have, everything we built together, and now I'm faced with this. My voice cracked under the weight of raw emotion. I could feel my pulse racing. Each heartbeat, a drum of urgency. Each breath, a battle to maintain composure. Emily swallowed hard, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together. I wanted to protect you, she admitted, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. There are things I couldn't tell you, things I had to manage on my own, but it wasn't meant to hurt you. It was never meant to hurt you. Her words, though earnest, felt like fragments of a larger, incomplete explanation. I realized that the web of secrecy was more intricate than I had imagined. Layers upon layers of half-truths and deliberate omissions that had culminated in this tense standoff. I glanced at the stranger, whose presence remained steady, almost menacing in its calm. There was a history here, a connection that I was only beginning to perceive. And yet it was clear that he played a significant role in the narrative that Emily had kept hidden. My thoughts spun, trying to reconcile the image of my wife, the photograph, the emails, and the present reality. The cognitive dissonance was dizzying, each piece of information reshaping the mental map I had held for our life together. A moment of silence stretched between us, heavy and charged, the air vibrating with the weight of unspoken truths. I felt the pressure building inside me, a mix of anticipation, anger, and an aching need for resolution. I realized that I could no longer stand on the periphery of this secret world. I had to confront it directly, to demand explanations, to face the reality that had been carefully hidden from me. Finally, Emily took a step forward, her eyes locking with mine, raw emotion beneath the surface of her composed exterior. I should have told you sooner, she whispered, her voice breaking. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I only made things worse. There's so much you don't know. But you deserve to. Her words hung in the air, a fragile bridge between the life we had known and the revelations that would follow. I felt a tremor of hope amidst the fear and betrayal. Perhaps there was a path through this, a way to uncover the truth without losing everything. But the presence of the stranger, silent and imposing, reminded me that the full story was far from complete. The confrontation was only beginning, and the journey to uncover the reality of Emily's secrecy and the stranger's role in it had only just begun. Emily's words hung in the air, fragile and tentative, but the weight of what they implied pressed down on me like a physical force. I could see it in her eyes, a mixture of fear, guilt, and desperation, yet also a glimmer of resolve, as though she had been preparing herself for this moment, even while I remained oblivious. The stranger in the room, silent and imposing, was an extension of the secret world she had tried to shield from me, a living testament to the complexity of the situation. My pulse raced, my thoughts spiraling through weeks of subtle clues, the late-night calls, the cryptic texts, the fleeting moments of evasiveness that had now coalesced into a damning pattern of deception. I need to know everything, I said, my voice tight with tension, struggling to contain the torrent of emotions that had been building for weeks. Who is he? What's going on? Why didn't you tell me? The questions were urgent, demanded answers, but Emily hesitated, as though weighing her next words with care. Her gaze flicked to the stranger, who remained unmoving, a silent participant in this delicate choreography of revelation. She took a deep breath, finally speaking. His name is Marcus. He was a part of something I got involved in before we met, something I thought I had left behind, something I never wanted to resurface. I didn't tell you because I wanted to protect us, to protect you. I thought I could handle it on my own. but it became more complicated than I ever imagined. Her words were heavy, layered with the gravity of truth and the lingering traces of fear. I felt a mixture of disbelief, anger, and a painful curiosity pressing me forward. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms, struggling to maintain composure. You were supposed to be honest with me, Emily. All these weeks, I've been blind to what was happening right in front of me. I trusted you. My voice cracked under the weight of betrayal, the raw pain of discovering that the foundation of my life had been undermined without my knowledge. The room seemed to contract around us, the walls pressing closer, as though emphasizing the intensity of the confrontation. Marcus, for the first time, spoke. His voice was calm, measured, with an unsettling undercurrent of authority. I don't mean to escalate this, but Emily asked me to help. She didn't want you to be dragged into it until the time was right. His presence was imposing, each word deliberate, as if testing my reactions, probing my resolve. My anger surged, a mix of fury at the secrecy and fear of the unknown. Yet I felt compelled to listen, to understand the dimensions of the reality that had been unfolding unbeknownst to me. Emily stepped closer, her hands trembling slightly. I thought I could manage Marcus, the situation he brought into my life, without dragging you into danger. I wanted to keep you safe, but it spiraled out of control. And I realized I had to tell you, I had to involve you, because this affects us both. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. A mirror reflecting the vulnerability and desperation that had driven her secrecy. I struggled to reconcile the Emily I had known, the loving, dependable partner, with the woman standing before me, entangled in a web of secrets and intrigue that now threatened the very fabric of our relationship. My mind raced, replaying every interaction, every nuance of the past weeks, seeking patterns and explanations. I thought of the hurried errands, the whispered phone calls, the evasive answers, all now recontextualized in light of Emily's revelation. The meticulous care with which she had constructed this narrative, the effort to shield me from potential danger, became clear. Yet the sting of betrayal, the feeling of being excluded from critical aspects of our shared life, was undeniable. Marcus shifted slightly, his gaze steady, unwavering. Emily is telling the truth. There are things you don't understand yet, but the danger is real. My presence here isn't to threaten you, but to ensure that what needs to happen can happen safely. We're dealing with people who don't care about boundaries, about your relationship, about the life you've built. That's why she kept you out of it for as long as she could. His calm, authoritative tone did little to soothe the storm raging within me. If anything, it intensified the anxiety, highlighting the enormity of the situation and the gravity of the decisions that lay ahead. I sank onto the edge of the sofa, my mind spinning with the weight of the revelations. The betrayal I had felt, the sense of deception, now mingled with an awareness of the danger Emily had been trying to protect me from. My emotions were a tangled mess of relief, fear, anger, and confusion. I wanted to scream, to demand accountability. Yet I recognized that clarity required restraint, observation, and careful processing. The weeks of hidden truths, subtle hints, and withheld information were now converging into a single, overwhelming reality that I had no choice but to confront. Emily reached out, her hand brushing against mine, a tentative gesture seeking connection amidst the chaos. I know it's a lot, and I don't expect forgiveness right away, she said softly, but you need to know everything. You deserve to know the truth. The sincerity in her voice, the vulnerability in her eyes, made it impossible to dismiss her words. I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the emotional storm, and nodded slightly, signaling that I was ready, willing to hear her out, to confront the full magnitude of what had been concealed. For the next hour, Emily unraveled the story, piece by piece, detailing her past entanglement with Marcus, the threats that had resurfaced, and the measures she had taken to shield our life from exposure. Every word, every revelation, added layers of complexity and gravity to the situation. Marcus remained present, silent at times, clarifying details only when necessary, ensuring that the narrative was coherent, accurate, and that I understood the stakes involved. The tension in the room ebbed and flowed, a delicate dance between disclosure and comprehension, each moment charged with the potential to shatter or heal. I listened, absorbing each revelation, my mind struggling to reconcile the image of Emily I had cherished with the complex, resourceful woman navigating hidden dangers that I had been oblivious to. The sense of betrayal softened slightly in the face of her intentions, her desire to protect, to manage threats, to maintain our safety. But it did not vanish. I was caught in a storm of conflicting emotions, a maelstrom of love, fear, anger, and understanding that demanded careful navigation. By the time the story concluded, the room was heavy with the weight of truth, the air thick with lingering tension. I understood now that Emily's secrecy had been driven not by malice or neglect, but by a calculated attempt to protect our shared life from forces I had never imagined. Marcus's presence, initially menacing, was contextualized as a necessary measure in a complex and dangerous situation. The revelation did not erase the pain, the sense of betrayal, or the anxiety of the past weeks, but it provided a framework for understanding, a path forward that required trust, communication, and careful consideration. I sat back, exhaling slowly, allowing the storm within me to settle just enough for clarity. The betrayal I had felt now intertwined with an acknowledgement of the danger Emily had navigated alone. The room, once charged with tension, began to feel like a space of negotiation, of reconciliation, and of preparation for the challenges ahead. I realized that the weeks of uncertainty, fear, and suspense had culminated in a moment that demanded both courage and understanding, and that the path forward would require careful, deliberate choices. The tension in the room reached a point where it seemed almost tangible, pressing against my chest with every heartbeat. I had absorbed Emily's story, processed Marcus's presence, and slowly begun to understand the labyrinth of secrets that had been orchestrated around me. Yet understanding did little to soothe the storm raging inside me. Anger, fear, betrayal, and relief collided in chaotic waves, each one demanding acknowledgement, each one demanding action. I could no longer remain a passive observer in the unfolding drama. The confrontation, the reckoning, had arrived, and I had to face it head on. Emily stepped closer, her eyes searching mine, a silent plea for patience, for understanding. "I know this is a lot," she whispered, her voice trembling. "And I know it looks like I've betrayed you. But you have to believe me. I never wanted to hurt you." I felt a pang in my chest, a mixture of hurt and lingering love. The woman I had married was standing before me, caught in the same storm, equally desperate to navigate the chaos with some semblance of integrity. I struggled to reconcile the loving, dependable partner I knew with the intricate web of secrecy, danger, and deception that had been woven into our lives. Marcus moved slightly, stepping forward to clarify a point Emily had just made. His presence, once threatening, now felt like a stabilizing force, a reminder that the danger she had been shielding me from was real and tangible. "Everything Emily has told you is true," he said calmly, his voice precise, almost clinical in its tone. "There are people involved who do not care about consequences, about boundaries, or about your safety. I am here to ensure that the situation remains contained until it can be resolved safely." His words underscored the gravity of the situation. Transforming abstract fear into concrete reality, I sank onto the edge of the sofa, my mind racing through every interaction, every nuance of Emily's behavior over the past weeks. The whispered phone calls, the evasive answers, the unexplained errands, all of it now made sense in a terrifying clarity. Yet, alongside the clarity, came an intense emotional turmoil. The realization that Emily had been burdened with these dangers alone, navigating threats I had never known existed, evoked a complex mixture of gratitude, guilt, and lingering resentment. I wanted to scream, to demand accountability, yet I also understood that the situation demanded strategy, composure, and careful thought. Emily reached out, her hand brushing mine with a tentative delicacy, an attempt at connection amidst the chaos. "I never wanted to deceive you," she said softly. "I thought I was protecting us. I thought I could manage everything myself. But I see now that I should have trusted you with the truth sooner." Her words were laced with vulnerability, the raw honesty beneath her composed exterior, cutting through the fog of anger and confusion. I felt a tremor of empathy, a recognition that the deception had been motivated not by malice, but by a desire to safeguard our shared life. Marcus shifted slightly, his presence a constant reminder of the stakes at hand. "Time is critical," he said, his tone measured but firm. "There are individuals who will not hesitate to exploit any weakness." Emily's choices were aimed at containment, but the situation has escalated beyond what she could manage alone. "We need to act carefully and decisively." I absorbed his words, the reality of the danger crystallizing in my mind. The stranger's calculated calm, his awareness of the unfolding scenario, emphasized that we were navigating not only a personal betrayal, but a tangible, external threat. I stood, pacing slowly, trying to impose order on the whirlwind of emotions within me. My anger at the secrecy, my fear of the unknown, and my lingering love for Emily collided in a volatile mix. "I trusted you," I said, my voice tight with suppressed emotion. Weeks of secrecy, hidden phone calls, mysterious absences. I was blind to what was happening in our own home. And now, I have to trust you to navigate this danger. My words hung in the air, heavy with accusation, yet tempered by the realization that Emily's choices had been made in the context of genuine concern for our safety. Emily's gaze softened, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I know it's hard to understand," she said. "I made mistakes, yes, but every choice I made was to keep you, us, safe. I never imagined it would feel like betrayal. I hoped you would see the intention, not just the concealment." Her voice trembled, and I felt the tension in the room shift slightly. The storm of anger and confusion gave way to a more measured, complex understanding. Though the emotional scars remained raw, Marcus stepped closer, his tone steady. "Authoritative, the time for hesitation has passed," he said. "We cannot afford mistakes now. The situation is delicate, and any misstep could escalate consequences rapidly. Emily's past entanglements are resurfacing, and your awareness now is critical. You must be involved in the next steps, whether you feel ready or not." His presence, once imposing, now served as a guide, a reminder that action was necessary, that the danger was real, and that the window for resolution was narrowing. I felt a surge of determination amidst the fear. The weeks of subtle clues, the growing suspicion, and the gradual revelation of Emily's concealed challenges had led to this confrontation. I realized that my role could no longer be passive. I had to engage, to act with clarity and resolve, to navigate the treacherous terrain of deception, danger, and emotional turmoil. My pulse slowed slightly, replaced by a focused intensity, a readiness to confront, to strategize, and to reclaim agency. In the unfolding scenario, Emily's hand rested briefly on my arm, a grounding touch amidst the chaos. "I need you to understand," she said, her voice soft but urgent. "This is bigger than us, bigger than our marriage, bigger than what you've seen so far. But I need you here, by my side, if we're going to get through this." The sincerity in her voice, the vulnerability she could no longer mask, reinforced the gravity of the situation and the necessity of unity in facing what lay ahead. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the storm within me. The emotional turmoil, the betrayal, the fear, the lingering love was now intertwined with the stark, undeniable reality of external threat. I had a choice: to retreat into anger and resentment, or to confront the situation with clarity, courage, and strategic resolve. The weeks of hidden truths, subtle manipulations, and dangerous proximity had culminated in this moment, demanding action, focus, and courage. I met Emily's gaze, finally nodding, a signal of tentative alignment. "All right," I said, my voice steadying. Tell me everything. We face this together. No more secrets, no more concealment. The room seemed to exhale with the declaration, the tension easing slightly, though the awareness of impending action remained. Marcus's presence was a constant reminder of the stakes, a beacon of control amidst the emotional turbulence. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of agency amidst the chaos. The confrontation, though fraught with danger and emotional complexity, had begun to resolve into a clear path, understanding the full scope of Emily's secrecy, acknowledging the threat posed by external forces, and preparing to act decisively to restore safety, trust, and clarity. The emotional storm had not passed, but the first steps toward resolution had been taken, and the high-stakes dance of revelation, confrontation, and action was now fully underway. The hours following our tense confrontation unfolded like a storm, refusing to break. I found myself pacing the living room, adrenaline still coursing through my veins, as Emily and Marcus outlined the situation in painstaking detail. Every nuance, every hidden facet of Emily's past entanglements had to be carefully understood. Marcus had been brought into our lives not to threaten, but to mitigate the risks that Emily had been managing alone, and yet the fact that she had kept me entirely in the dark felt like a double-edged sword. My anger and relief collided violently. I was furious at the secrecy, yet profoundly aware that the deception had been a shield, one intended to protect us both from threats I had been blissfully unaware of. The stranger, Marcus, methodically walked me through the network of complications, each revelation increasing the weight of responsibility pressing on my shoulders. Emily's previous involvement in a clandestine business dealing had resurfaced unexpectedly, and individuals from that past had reemerged with intentions that were anything but benign. It was not just her secret life that had been dangerous. It was the reality that our domestic sanctuary had been infiltrated by forces capable of unraveling everything. Every word Marcus spoke added urgency to the situation, making it clear that inaction was not an option. I sank into the couch, trying to process the avalanche of new information. The betrayal I had felt initially had transformed into a layered understanding of risk, necessity, and strategic secrecy. Emily had been navigating threats that were beyond my comprehension, calculating every move, every interaction, to minimize exposure. My anger was still present, simmering beneath the surface, but it was now tempered by recognition of her bravery and the meticulous planning that had kept us safe. I realized that what had seemed like deception was, in fact, a complex strategy to protect not just her own life, but ours collectively. Marcus remained silent for the most part, his presence a steady anchor amidst the swirling emotions. Occasionally, he would interject with a clarification or correction, ensuring that the sequence of events, the potential outcomes, and the necessary precautions were clearly understood. His professionalism and controlled demeanor were almost hypnotic, a stark contrast to the chaos that had been raging inside me. Yet, even as I listened, a part of me bristled at the idea that someone I barely knew was now part of our private life, inhabiting the spaces of our home and influencing the decisions that affected us both. Emily sat beside me, her hand brushing against mine, a tentative gesture seeking connection and reassurance. "I know it looks like I've betrayed you," she said softly, her voice layered with both guilt and sincerity. "But I couldn't involve you until I was certain we could manage the situation safely. It wasn't about keeping secrets for my own sake. It was about survival." Her words resonated with me. Yet the sting of exclusion and the realization of just how precarious our circumstances had been remained. I understood now that trust in our relationship would need to be rebuilt, layer by layer. As we navigated the immediate threat, I looked at Marcus again, noting the intensity in his eyes. "We can't waste time," he said firmly. "The longer we delay, the higher the risk. You need to be proactive." Emily's plan was effective up to a point, but with your awareness now, we can coordinate and address the vulnerabilities more effectively. There is a method to minimize exposure and reduce the likelihood of escalation. His words were precise, calculated, and left no room for hesitation. It became abundantly clear that our next moves had to be strategic, coordinated, and executed with precision. The stakes were far higher than mere emotional betrayal. I felt a surge of determination. The weeks of tension, suspicion, and hidden truths had culminated in this moment. And while the anger and pain of betrayal were still palpable, the necessity of action imposed a new focus. I realized that my role was no longer passive. I had to be fully present, fully engaged, and fully prepared for whatever might unfold. Emily's secrecy had been a protective measure, but now our collaboration would define whether we emerged intact or fractured. We spent hours mapping out potential scenarios, discussing contingencies, and rehearsing responses. Marcus guided the planning with meticulous precision, assigning roles, identifying safe spaces, and outlining the steps necessary to confront external threats while maintaining our safety. The emotional intensity was palpable. Every decision carried both strategic and personal weight. Emily's presence alongside me was grounding, yet her anxiety was unmistakable, a reflection of the burden she had carried alone and the lingering fear of exposure. By late evening, the initial storm had calmed somewhat. Though the tension in the house remained, I had begun to internalize the gravity of Emily's deception, understanding that her intentions had been protective rather than malicious. Yet the process of rebuilding trust and reestablishing control over our shared environment was only beginning. Each room in the house, each shadow and corner, now carried the weight of both past secrecy and present vigilance. We were negotiating a delicate balance between personal reconciliation and strategic preparation, a dynamic that demanded emotional fortitude and unwavering attention. Marcus continued to monitor the situation with a quiet, deliberate presence, ensuring that every aspect of the plan was feasible and that we were prepared for contingencies. His calm demeanor was both reassuring and unsettling. It underscored the seriousness of the circumstances, while simultaneously emphasizing the precision required to navigate them successfully. I felt a mixture of gratitude and wariness, recognizing that his role, while necessary, represented an intrusion into the intimate space of our home, one that I had no choice but to accept. Emily and I sat together in a rare moment of quiet reflection, the weight of the day settling over us. I could see the toll it had taken on her, the exhaustion, the anxiety, the constant vigilance that had defined her actions. And yet, I also recognized the courage it took to confront both the external threat and the internal consequences of her secrecy. Our eyes met, and in that gaze was a silent acknowledgement of the shared burden, the delicate trust that now needed to be rebuilt, and the unspoken understanding that our partnership, tested to its limits, could yet endure. By the time night fell, the house had regained a semblance of calm. Though the underlying tension remained, the immediate danger had been assessed, strategies had been outlined, and we were prepared for the next steps. The revelation of Emily's secrecy and the introduction of Marcus into our lives had irrevocably altered the dynamic of our home, but it had also created an opportunity to confront both external threats and internal fractures with clarity and determination. I understood that the path forward would be fraught with emotional and strategic challenges, yet the resolve to face them together offered a tentative sense of empowerment amidst the chaos. The day ended with a quiet understanding that trust could be rebuilt, that the dangers that had lurked in shadows could be mitigated, and that our partnership, though tested, could endure. Emily's confession, Marcus's guidance, and my own confrontation with the reality of the situation had created a crucible in which both emotional resilience and strategic clarity were forged. The night settled over the house, heavy but less suffocating, as if the walls themselves were acknowledging the temporary reprieve and the readiness for the challenges that lay ahead. The next morning, the house was bathed in a diffused light that seemed to soften the edges of the tension that had gripped us for days. Despite the relative calm, an undercurrent of urgency persisted. Marcus had outlined a clear plan the night before, but implementing it would require precision, focus, and a measured approach. Emily and I moved through the space carefully, each of us acutely aware of the delicate balance between action and restraint. Every object, every shadow, every subtle detail was now a part of the operational landscape, and I felt the weight of responsibility settle firmly on my shoulders. I began by reviewing the documents Emily and Marcus had organized, the records of previous encounters, the potential threats, and the contingency measures. Each piece of information added layers of complexity to an already intricate web, but it also provided clarity, a map of the terrain we now had to navigate. Emily watched me closely, her eyes searching mine, gauging my reactions, and silently seeking reassurance that I was ready to engage with the reality she had been managing alone. The silent communication between us, once grounded in shared domestic routines, was now built upon trust, forged in the fire of adversity. Marcus, ever the methodical presence, guided us through the strategy once more. "We have to be precise," he said, his tone calm but firm. "Any misstep could escalate the situation beyond control. Timing, coordination, and clear communication are critical. You must act together, anticipating reactions and maintaining situational awareness at all times." His words underscored the gravity of the task ahead, reinforcing that the threats we faced were tangible, deliberate, and strategically minded. My pulse quickened with both fear and determination. The weeks of hidden truths, suspicion, and emotional turbulence had prepared me, in a strange way, to approach this moment with clarity. Emily moved beside me, her hand brushing lightly against mine, in a gesture of tentative solidarity. "I know it's a lot to take in," she whispered, her voice trembling with both fear and determination. "But you're here now, and we can face this together. We can reclaim control, make decisions with foresight rather than reaction, and finally put an end to the uncertainty that has haunted us." Her words, though soft, carried the weight of resolve. I felt the tension in my chest ease slightly, replaced by a steely focus. I realized that our partnership, tested to its limits, was now being fortified by the necessity of action, collaboration, and mutual understanding. We spent the morning rehearsing scenarios, anticipating possible reactions from those who had resurfaced from Emily's past. Every movement, every exchange, every potential threat was considered and accounted for. Marcus provided guidance, emphasizing both caution and decisiveness. His presence, once a source of unease, had become an anchor of strategy, a reminder that knowledge and preparation could mitigate even the most unpredictable dangers. Emily's confidence, though fragile, grew as the plan took shape, and I felt a sense of unity emerging, a tentative, yet essential, alignment of purpose. As the afternoon approached, the first phase of our plan was to secure the house, ensuring that we were protected from unforeseen intrusions. Emily and I moved methodically through each room, checking locks, securing entry points, and creating a network of safe spaces within the home, Marcus observed, offering corrections and suggestions, ensuring that our movements were efficient and that our strategy accounted for contingencies. The process was meticulous, almost ritualistic, yet it carried an undeniable tension. Each door bolted, each window secured, each space verified became a small victory in reclaiming control over a home that had been infiltrated, both physically and emotionally. In recent days, by evening, the immediate environment was fortified, and we transitioned to planning our next interactions with the external threat. Emily detailed the intelligence she had gathered over the weeks, information that had guided her clandestine actions and that would now inform our coordinated response. Marcus outlined potential scenarios, probability assessments, and risk mitigation strategies. I listened intently, absorbing every detail, my mind working through the variables, anticipating the outcomes, and calculating potential responses. The responsibility was immense, yet the clarity of purpose provided a stabilizing force amidst the residual emotional turbulence. We paused briefly to assess our readiness. Emily looked at me, her expression a mixture of anxiety, hope, and determination. "This is it," she said softly. "We've prepared as best we can. Now, it's time to act, decisively and together." I nodded, feeling the weight of both emotional and strategic responsibility. The betrayal and secrecy of the past weeks had been painful, yet they had also prepared us for this moment. I felt a sense of resolve, a commitment to confronting the situation with both clarity and courage, knowing that the outcome would define not only our immediate safety, but the integrity of our shared life. As night fell, we initiated the first contact with the external party. Marcus guided us through each step, monitoring responses, providing instructions, and ensuring that every action was measured and deliberate. The intensity of the situation was palpable, every movement scrutinized, every word chosen with care. I felt the culmination of the weeks of hidden truths, suspicion, and emotional turmoil manifesting in this high-stakes operation. Each action carried both strategic and personal weight, demanding focus, courage, and unwavering attention. Throughout the evening, Emily and I communicated with precision, coordinating movements, confirming actions, and responding to unexpected developments. Marcus's presence remained a stabilizing force, guiding us through the intricacies of strategy and ensuring that we maintained composure amidst the high-pressure environment. The experience was exhausting, both mentally and emotionally, yet it was also empowering. The process of actively confronting the threat, reclaiming agency, and implementing the plan allowed us to transform fear and uncertainty into deliberate, controlled action. By the time the night drew to a close, we had successfully executed the initial phase of the plan. The immediate threats were mitigated, the house secured, and the external factors temporarily contained. I sank into the sofa, exhausted but resolute. Reflecting on the journey from betrayal and secrecy to strategic action and partial resolution, Emily sat beside me, her hand in mine, a symbol of solidarity amidst the turmoil. We had faced deception, navigated danger, and begun to reclaim control over our shared life. The process of reconciliation, rebuilding trust, and confronting the emotional and strategic challenges of the past weeks was far from complete, but the first critical steps had been taken. For the first time in days, the house felt like a home again, not merely a space of tension and hidden threats, but a site of reclaimed agency and cautious hope. The lessons of vigilance, communication, and collaboration were etched into every movement, every decision, every interaction. I understood that the path forward would require continued vigilance, strategic thinking, and emotional resilience. Yet there was also a sense of cautious optimism, a recognition that we were no longer passive participants in a hidden drama, but active agents capable of shaping our circumstances, protecting our lives, and rebuilding the trust that had been tested so severely. The first light of dawn seeped into the house, casting long, gentle rays across the familiar yet still strained spaces of our home. The night's events had left us exhausted, emotionally raw, and yet, in the soft glow of morning, there was a sense of fragile reprieve. Emily and I moved quietly through the rooms, each of us acutely aware of the lingering tension, but also conscious of the subtle victories we had achieved. The house felt different now, not entirely safe, but reclaimed, a place where strategic planning and careful vigilance had restored a measure of control over the chaos that had threatened to overtake our lives. I watched Emily as she prepared a pot of coffee, the rhythmic motions of pouring, stirring, and setting cups down on the counter, providing a comforting anchor amidst the residual emotional turbulence. She was present, aware, and cautiously optimistic, yet there remained a shadow of anxiety in her posture and in the tension that lingered in her hands. I could feel the weight of her past secrecy and the stress of the night pressing on her, but I also saw determination, resilience, and a desire to rebuild. The complexity of her emotions mirrored my own: relief, lingering doubt, and the need to regain equilibrium after the storm of betrayal, fear, and uncertainty. Sitting together at the small kitchen table, we spoke quietly, our conversation carefully measured, each word chosen with intention. Emily recounted the details she had withheld before, adding nuance and depth to the narrative she had revealed the previous evening. Her explanations, while sometimes difficult to hear, provided clarity and context, transforming what had initially felt like a personal betrayal into an intricate web of strategic choices, protective measures, and survival-driven decisions. Marcus remained nearby, monitoring communications and providing guidance. His presence, a reminder that while the emotional turbulence was significant, the practical and strategic challenges had not yet fully abated. As we processed the revelations together, I began to notice subtle shifts in Emily's demeanor. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly, her eyes no longer darting nervously at every creak or shadow. I recognized a moment of acceptance, an acknowledgement that while the past could not be changed, the present was now a space in which we could exert agency, make deliberate decisions, and rebuild trust. The process of recovery was already underway, and though the path ahead remained uncertain, the mere act of shared comprehension provided a foundation upon which we could begin to reconstruct both our emotional and domestic landscape. We moved through the house methodically, attending to both physical and emotional spaces. Doors were checked, locks verified, and the home was secured not merely as a defensive measure, but as a symbolic act of reclaiming our sanctuary. Each action was deliberate, providing a sense of stability and reinforcing the idea that though external threats remained, our environment was now one in which we could exert control. The ritual of organizing, securing, and observing became a therapeutic exercise, a method of converting anxiety into tangible action, and gradually, a semblance of calm began to permeate the household. Emily and I spent time revisiting the documents and communications that had been sources of tension. Together, we reconstructed timelines, reviewed correspondences, and analyzed actions taken both by her and by Marcus. This process was exhaustive, requiring patience, focus, and a willingness to confront painful truths. Yet it was also empowering. By engaging directly with the evidence, I transitioned from being a passive observer, once left in the dark, about critical aspects of our lives, to an informed and active participant, capable of contributing to both strategic decisions and emotional reconciliation. Marcus observed silently, providing input only when necessary, reinforcing key points, and offering clarifications. His role, once threatening in its presence, had evolved into that of a guide and mediator, ensuring that our strategic decisions were sound and that our understanding of past events was accurate. The presence of a third-party expert, though unconventional in the domestic sphere, allowed Emily and me to navigate the complex interplay of personal, emotional, and external threats with a measure of confidence and clarity. By mid-afternoon, there was a palpable shift in the atmosphere. The home no longer felt like a battleground of secrecy, but a carefully managed space where transparency, communication, and preparation were actively being cultivated. Emily and I shared quiet moments of reflection, acknowledging the emotional toll of the past weeks, while also recognizing the progress we had made in reclaiming agency over our lives. The interplay of vulnerability, honesty, and strategic awareness had begun to forge a new foundation of trust, one resilient in the face of past deception, yet flexible enough to accommodate the ongoing challenges we faced. I noticed a subtle lightness in Emily's movements, a careful but noticeable easing of tension as we completed the tasks we had set for ourselves. Each accomplishment, no matter how minor, a secured window, a verified communication, in a clarified timeline, served as both a practical step in mitigating external threats and a symbolic act of regaining equilibrium. Our interactions, though cautious, were suffused with renewed respect, recognition of each other's capabilities, and an emergent sense of partnership forged under pressure. As evening approached, we allowed ourselves a moment of stillness. Sitting together on the sofa, the muted glow of the setting sun filtering through the curtains, I reflected on the tumultuous journey we had endured. The weeks of secrecy, suspicion, and hidden danger had challenged our relationship and our perception of safety. Yet they had also revealed resilience, courage, and the capacity for strategic and emotional collaboration. Emily's willingness to eventually disclose the truth, Marcus's guidance, and my own engagement with the complexities of the situation had begun to restore both trust and agency. We spoke quietly about the future, acknowledging that the path ahead would require continued vigilance, honest communication, and deliberate action. The emotional aftermath of secrecy and deception could not be erased, but it could be navigated with care, empathy, and a commitment to mutual understanding. Emily and I recognized that our partnership had been tested, but the shared experience of confronting the threats, both internal and external, had also created a foundation for rebuilding trust, fortifying emotional bonds, and establishing a framework for ongoing collaboration. In those quiet moments, I realized that healing was a process, not a singular event. The betrayal and secrecy that had initially felt insurmountable were now contextualized within a broader narrative of protection, strategic foresight, and survival. Our relationship, though scarred, had emerged from the crucible of deception and danger with new insights, renewed determination, and an understanding that trust, once fractured, could be reconstructed through transparency, deliberate action, and shared responsibility. The house, once a theater of tension and fear, now felt like a living testament to resilience and recovery. Each room, each carefully considered precaution, each conversation we had shared, contributed to a renewed sense of security and partnership. Though the shadows of past deception lingered, they were now illuminated by understanding, accountability, and the tangible steps we had taken to reclaim our life together. As night fell, Emily and I shared a quiet dinner. The simplicity of the act, a stark contrast to the intensity of the previous days. The conversation was gentle, reflective, and suffused with a cautious optimism. I could see the relief in Emily's eyes, the tentative hope that the future, though uncertain, could be approached with deliberate care, honesty, and mutual support. Marcus remained nearby, a silent presence reinforcing our sense of preparedness, yet allowing the space for emotional reflection, reconciliation, and the rebuilding of trust. The day closed with an awareness that while the challenges were far from over, the foundation for recovery had been laid. We had navigated the intricacies of deception, threat, and emotional turbulence with determination, strategy, and collaboration. The lessons learned in vigilance, communication, and partnership would continue to shape our actions, decisions, and interactions in the days to come. There was no finality, but there was a profound sense of progress, an acknowledgement that even amidst betrayal and danger, agency, resilience, and shared commitment could forge a path forward. The following morning carried with it a quiet resolve, the kind of calm that feels fragile yet determined. Emily and I moved through our home together, coordinating our actions with a newfound rhythm. The house, once a battleground of secrecy and suspicion, now felt like a reclaimed space, each room infused with cautious optimism and deliberate awareness. Marcus remained nearby, a steady presence, guiding and observing as we implemented the final measures to secure our environment and our lives. The tangible remnants of past deception, the emails, the photograph, the weeks of clandestine maneuvering had been confronted, and for the first time, a pathway forward emerged. I felt a mixture of relief, apprehension, and lingering hurt as I watched Emily move through her morning routines. The small gestures, the careful placement of objects, the deliberate attention to detail, the soft hum of her voice as she coordinated with me, spoke volumes about her commitment to restore trust and stability. Her vulnerability was evident, yet so too was her resilience The courage required to face the consequences of her secrecy, and the determination to rebuild our partnership on a foundation of transparency and mutual respect. We sat together at the kitchen table, a sense of intimacy returning slowly, cautiously. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting soft patterns on the wooden surface, a visual reminder of both the continuity and fragility of domestic life. Emily reached across the table, her hand brushing mine in a tentative, grounding gesture. "We've come a long way," she said softly, her voice laden with emotion. "I know the road ahead won't be easy, but I want us to move forward together, fully aware, fully committed." Her sincerity struck a chord deep within me. The betrayal and fear of recent weeks still lingered, yet there was also an undeniable sense of partnership, a willingness to face the aftermath and the challenges together. Marcus provided a final overview of the situation, emphasizing both the immediate safety measures and the strategic steps required to ensure continued security. His tone was precise, almost clinical, yet it carried an undercurrent of reassurance. "You've both made significant progress," he said, "and the immediate threats have been mitigated. The critical elements of preparation and coordination are now in place. The next phase involves continued vigilance, clear communication, and the reinforcement of trust. Emotionally, this is a pivotal moment, acknowledging what has occurred while moving forward with intentionality." His words underscored the dual nature of our task, managing both tangible threats and the delicate process of emotional restoration. I absorbed his guidance, recognizing that the steps we were taking were as much about psychological resilience as they were about physical security. The weeks of secrecy and tension had left emotional scars, and rebuilding trust would require deliberate, consistent effort. Each interaction, each acknowledgement of past mistakes, each moment of transparency was a building block in the reconstruction of our relationship. I felt a cautious optimism, tempered by the awareness that progress required patience, understanding, and unwavering commitment. We began to address the residual consequences of Emily's past secrecy, discussing the steps necessary to reintegrate the various aspects of our shared life that had been disrupted. Financial records, personal correspondence, and communication channels that had been influenced by the hidden threat were reviewed, reorganized, and secured. Every action reinforced a sense of agency and control, mitigating the anxiety and disorientation that had characterized the weeks of uncertainty. Emily's competence and resilience shone through, a reminder of the capabilities and strength that had been veiled beneath the surface of secrecy. The afternoon brought a moment of reflection. Emily and I sat together on the porch, watching the world outside, allowing ourselves a pause from the meticulous attention required to navigate our immediate environment. The sun warmed our faces, the breeze carried a gentle reassurance, and for the first time in days, there was a sense of temporal and emotional space. We spoke softly, sharing observations, acknowledging the difficulties of recent weeks, and tentatively exploring the path forward. The process of dialogue, of mutual understanding, and of rebuilding connection was painstaking but essential. Marcus monitored communications discreetly, offering insight when necessary, but largely allowing Emily and me to navigate the emotional terrain ourselves. His presence, while still a reminder of the external complexities we faced, had become an instrument of stability, providing reassurance that the tactical elements of our lives were managed while leaving space for personal reconciliation. I felt a measure of relief, recognizing that our efforts to reclaim both our domestic space and our emotional equilibrium were beginning to coalesce into a coherent, manageable framework. As evening approached, we completed the final measures of our coordinated plan. Locks were verified, security protocols reviewed, and contingency measures rehearsed. Each action reinforced the sense that we were now active participants in safeguarding our lives rather than passive recipients of uncertainty and deception. Emily and I exchanged a glance, a subtle acknowledgement of shared accomplishment, the quiet satisfaction of having confronted danger and uncertainty together. Dinner was quiet, subdued yet comforting, The act of sharing a meal, once mundane and taken for granted, now felt charged with significance. It was a ritual of reclamation, a reaffirmation of the domestic and emotional foundations that had been tested. Conversation flowed cautiously, punctuated by reflective silences, each pause, allowing the emotional weight of recent events to settle, while also nurturing the emerging sense of connection and mutual understanding. Later, in the dim light of our living room, Emily and I reviewed the lessons learned. The weeks of secrecy, deception, and latent danger had tested our trust, resilience, and capacity for collaboration. Yet, through careful observation, strategic coordination, and mutual support, we had navigated the storm, confronted the threats, and begun the process of emotional and practical restoration. The experience underscored the necessity of vigilance, communication, and deliberate action in maintaining both safety and relational integrity. In these quiet moments, I recognized a profound shift. The fear, uncertainty, and betrayal that had dominated recent weeks had not vanished entirely, but they had been transformed into a deeper awareness, a refined capacity for discernment, and an understanding of the critical importance of transparency and collaboration. Emily and I sat together, hands intertwined, sharing a mutual acknowledgement of the journey we had undertaken, the dangers we had faced, and the resilience we had discovered within ourselves and within our partnership. By nightfall, the house felt restored, both physically and emotionally, a testament to the careful navigation of truth, danger, and reconciliation. Emily and I reflected on the journey, acknowledging both the pain of hidden truths and the power of deliberate, collaborative action in reclaiming control. The shadows of past deception lingered, but they were now illuminated by understanding, strategic foresight, and the shared commitment to move forward together. As we prepared for bed, I felt a sense of closure, tempered by the recognition that healing and vigilance are ongoing processes. The weeks of secrecy, suspense, and emotional turbulence had tested the foundation of our lives. Yet, through confrontation, collaboration, and careful action, we had not only survived, but established a pathway toward recovery, trust, and strengthened partnership. The journey had been arduous, the stakes high, but the lessons learned about transparency, resilience, and the necessity of facing uncomfortable truths were invaluable. In that quiet moment, as the house settled into a calm rhythm, I understood that while the external threats could resurface and emotional scars would require time to fully heal, we had emerged from the crucible stronger, wiser, and more united. The events of recent weeks had forged a partnership tempered by adversity, fortified by transparency, and prepared to navigate both the complexities of the external world and the intricate emotional landscapes of our shared life. Life often tests us in ways we never anticipate. The journey through deception, fear, and hidden truths can leave scars, but it also teaches resilience, empathy, and the power of trust. We learn that true partnership isn't just about shared joy, it's about facing challenges together, communicating openly, and supporting each other, even when the path is uncertain. The courage to confront difficult realities, the patience to rebuild broken trust, and the determination to act with clarity transform adversity into growth. Every obstacle holds a lesson, every hardship a chance to strengthen our bonds, and every moment of fear an opportunity to discover our own inner strength. What about you? Have you ever faced a moment that tested your trust or resilience? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective, and if you want to explore more gripping, emotional, and cinematic stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for updates and new videos.